Humanity was once a thriving civilization who were prospering during what was known as the Golden Age, a time where technology was at an all-time high, space exploration was at the forefront of their goals, and a time where a unique bond would form with a mysterious being known only as the Traveller, a being that would venture over the solar system, terraforming planets such as Mars and Venus, allowing humanity to set up homes there and continue to build their civilization. But of course, because of humanity's golden era, this attracted others to seek out their powers of the light and the Traveller and target all of humanity's colonies. These creatures would be known as creatures of the darkness, such as the deadly fallen scavengers, the noble militaristic cabal, the killer robots of the Vex, as well as the creepy undead beings known as the Hive. As the creatures of the darkness took to taking out humanity, the collapse would happen, forcing all of the humans to seek refuge away from the horrors, meaning they only had one city remaining under the sole protection of the Traveller. As centuries passed, this city would be the last beacon of hope for humanity, as they tried desperately to fight back against the overwhelming enemy forces. Guardians would be those empowered by the Traveller's light, revived by ghosts, giving them near immortality, as well as giving them unique abilities. Whether they wanted it or not, these Guardians would step into a war with the Cabal on Mars, take out Vex minds in their hostile simulation worlds, as well as the Hive God King and ruler of the Taken Oryx. It would seem like nothing could take out these noble Guardians, even when the light was taken from them by the Cabal Red Legion commander Gaul. However, lurking in the shadows unnoticed by many was one of Oryx's siblings, another Hive God that could manipulate the minds of others and fill them with false promises. This Hive God would seek out a way to take back what was hers, as well as seek out all of the secrets of the universe, giving her ultimate power to do what she wants. This Hive God would be known as Savathun, the Witch Queen, and would reveal herself to the Guardians as a supposed protector, but her true intentions are hidden, for now at least. But who is Savathun really? Where did she come from, and what has she been up to during the whole timeline of humanity's events? Well, in today's video we tell the tale of Savathun, the Witch Queen, and how she is one of the most dangerous yet important beings within the whole universe and beyond. This is the tale of the Witch Queen known as Savathun from the Destiny universe. Before we tell of the origins of Savathun, it has to be said that the Witch Queen is the god of lies and deception, and whatever she tells within her stories, it must be made note that she is most likely lying at some point. So whilst these tales are written down and are seen as fact, if Savathun had any involvement in these tales, they may not be 100% true, so always take her backstory with a grain of salt, because there may be more that she hasn't shown us yet, or stuff that can change within a heartbeat. Also, this lore is extremely complex, so I try my best to get everything in here and make it coherent. If I cut something short, I do apologise, but I really try and just make it engaging for you guys. Also, please excuse some of the pronunciations. These names are extremely difficult to pronounce sometimes, even after listening to it thousands of times. But anyways, for now, let's go over who Savathun was before the Guardians encountered her. Savathun was never her original name. In fact, she was born under the name of Sathona on the planet of Fundament. At this point in time, the Hive as we know them were not really a thing, as Sathona was part of a species known as the Proto-Hive, whose homeworld had crashed into Fundament millions of years earlier, with the shard of their planet helping Fundament form its continents. Within these continents, one known as the Osmium Court was formed, ruled by the Osmium King, father of Sathona. She was his second-born daughter with her sisters Ziru and Orash. During their early years, they would be tutored by Taox, who was a sterile mother capable of spawning children and living much longer due to her being able to create mother jelly that they could consume at adulthood. With this knowledge in mind, Sathona realized she wanted to take this same path, not because she craved having children, but because she wanted to make sure she lived for a long time and make her life worth something, as their species' lifespan was relatively short. During this time, Sathona's father had just turned 10 Fundament years old, which was essentially a lifetime for the species, and whilst venturing the shores of his kingdom, discovered a dead worm, which he would take and tend to it. However, taking this worm and becoming familiar with it, he would suddenly see that it prophesied a disaster that was soon to come when the planets all aligned. Trying to tell his kin of what he had seen, his children did not believe his words, thinking he was becoming mad due to his old age. Only Orash took her father's warnings to heart, but the warnings were immediately shut down by Teox. With their father now supposedly not with it anymore, Teox also noted that the children were not ready to rule the Osmium court, or protect it from their rival kingdom of the Helium court. She did notice, however, that Savathûn was an incredible thinker despite her age of 2 fundament years old, but could not fight if the time came. In a time of utter desperation, Teox set up a plan, sending a message to the Helium court. Teox suggested that they would help the Helium drinkers, the rulers of the court, to assassinate the king and his daughters, and in reward, allow her to be the regent. The Helium drinkers agreed to this and invaded the land and killed the king, however were not successful in killing his daughters. During this attack, Savathûn stole her father's worm in their escape from the land, and once reaching Oresh's ship, the betrayed sisters set out to seek revenge on what had happened, making a blood oath with one another, and Savathûn vowing that she would become a mother and raise her spawn on the corpses of the Helium drinkers. As the sisters ventured over the land of Fundament, Savathûn started hearing the voice of her father's worm, who helped guide them all throughout their journey. Along the way, the three would find a ship that they would call the Needle, whose crew had mysteriously died due to an unknown creature that hatched from an egg and killed them. Zero thought they could sell the ship at Fundament's main trading area so they could then form an army of mercenaries and hit back against the Helium drinkers. However, listening to the worm, Savathûn, along with Oresh, decided to keep the ship for themselves as it housed incredible technology within. After 2 years repairing the ship, Savathûn was now 5 years old, meaning she was getting to the age where she could no longer eat Mother Jelly to help her with the aging process, meaning their ultimate plan of hitting back against their betrayers would never come to fruition. They were running out of time. Orash came up with a plan. They needed to dive into the center of Fundament's core beneath the ocean. Once again, Zero disagreed. Savathûn, with the aid of the worm, decided it was for the best, and the three ventured down into the ocean. As the three then got down there, they then encountered the creature known as the Leviathan, a creature long spoken of in Proto-Hive myth. Knowing exactly where they were going, the Leviathan warned the three that if they venture further, they would unleash disaster upon the universe, stating that they would have to choose between the light, which offered civilization, and the darkness, which offered only violence. However, at the same time, the prophesied disaster that their father had been raving about before he died had begun, and the sisters needed to find a way to stop it. The Leviathan had no way to solve this situation though, so with that, Savathûn revealed the worm had been helping her all this time, suggesting that they needed to go down to the core in the first place. And with that, the three continued, ignoring what the Leviathan had warned. As they reached the center of the planet, the sisters found the worm gods: Akka, the worm of secrets; Ear, the keeper of order; the ever hunger; Zol, will of thousands; and Yul, the honest worm. Immediately on entering, the worm gods offered their species a chance to escape the planet of Fundament and offered them the opportunity of achieving immortality. The only thing they needed to do was allow the worms to become symbiotes and spread them amongst their species. On top of that, if they agreed, the sisters would always have to test their true natures. Zero must always test her strength, Savathûn must always be cunning, and Oresh must always try to understand. With this proposal on the table, the sisters agreed to take on the worms and thus became the first official Hive species. With this, the sisters took different identities. Zero took the night form and became Zivu Arath. Savathûn took the mother morph and became Savathûn, and Oresh took the king morph, changing their gender to male and becoming Oryx, the king of the Hive. Savathûn and her siblings now came to power, and it was finally time for the new age of the Hive. The siblings who had all ventured down into the Fundament core had all now morphed into their new forms, having a symbiote life with the worms, and were now essentially immortal. But now they had to get the rest of their species to come on board with this plan. With this, the siblings forced an ultimatum on them to accept the worms or they would perish. During this time, Oryx drew his attention to Fundament's moons, which housed the species known as the Ammonites, who had allied with the Traveller and gave asylum to their betrayer, Teox. At first, he wanted to negotiate with the Ammonites. However, the worms had now begun pressuring Savathun to kill her brother, and so she did, labeling it as his punishment. Oryx, however, did not fully die. Instead, his soul was sent to his ascendant realm, also known as the Throne World, where he would remain until he returned to the mortal realm. Because of this event, however, Oryx lost all of his sympathy and goodwill and became a merciless tyrant. This led to constant war with all of his siblings, who would kill each other on a regular basis after they had defeated the Ammonites. The reason for this war between one another was to become the sharpest blades in the universe, as part of their worship of the sword logic. After each death, they would get sent to their ascendant realm, where they would wait until they got sent back to the mortal world, for the cycle to continue over and over again. By this point though, the war to hit back against Teox had turned into a campaign of genocide, as they destroyed all of the Ammonites and other interstellar civilizations to feed the hunger of their worms. After this, however, Oryx decided he wanted to study the sword logic more, and set up the Court of Oryx, where his most powerful champions would lay. This then prompted Savathun to also establish one of her own, and with it set up Hive God, Savathun's official throne world. After working out that they had all been deceived by the worm gods, who constantly wanted more and more for them, Oryx sought to hit back and save them from their dilemma. After killing both his sisters to acquire their power, Oryx faced his patron god Akka, the Worm of Secrets, and killed him then and there, stealing his ability to call upon the deep and create the Tablets of Ruin, allowing him to acquire the ability of being able to take. With this done, Oryx had now transformed into Oryx the Taken King. Now with his incredible power, Oryx brought back Xivu in an act of war and revived Savathun in an act of cunning. On top of that, he then introduced the tithe system, essentially a hierarchy system, which would then lead to acts of violence that would eventually feed the three siblings and continue to invoke their inner natures. As the siblings continued to war against any species in their way, and after the event known as the Golden Amputation, Oryx would be granted an audience with the Deep itself, also known as the Darkness. As he ventured into his throne world, however, Savathun and Xivu saw this as an opportunity to trap him in there and steal his Tablets of Ruin. But before they could, Oryx heard of these plans and waged war once again on Savathun. After all of this, Savathun now learned of Oryx's daughter, Anuk, and was both enraged and delighted by her brilliance. Once again, as Oryx was off studying the Deep, Savathun tricked Oryx's son Crota into cutting a portal inside his throne world, allowing the Vex to invade it. Savathun was amused by this situation. However, once again, Oryx was alerted to it and fought back against the incursion. But with Oryx now busy fighting back for his homeworld, both his siblings realized this was the time to attack and kill him. But Oryx once again was ahead of them as he moved away from his throne world and set up his new base of operations within his mighty dreadnought made from the remains of Akka, stealing Savathun's scalpel to make it. After Oryx had now captured the hive mind of Coria and presented it to Savathun, the siblings split off, with Oryx taken to his dreadnought. Savathun ventured into the Harmony's black hole to hide from Oryx's spying eye, and Xivu took her fleets away from Oryx, believing he constrained her too much. During her time within the black hole, Savathun tried to come up with a new way to feed the worm's hunger inside of her, and came up with a new method that wasn't the traditional hive tribute system. Here she used the black hole to try and manipulate time to allow her hive to gather tribute at a much faster pace, making it so time traveled much faster, meaning she could gain more tribute in less time due to how black holes manipulate time around them. She also wanted to gather hive tribute through the failings of other species, instead of the violence way that was going on at this current stage. After Oryx had gifted Savathun the Vex Mind of Coria, she went on to teach it how to harness hive magic and apply it to computational problem solving. Because of this, the mind was able to navigate and engineer the singularity, then format the information for Savathun to understand. Now fully understanding the singularity's inner workings, Savathun could continue her grand scheme, and as she quoted to a confused Thrall, "I will be immortal, as long as anyone seeks to understand me and fails." But now as she lurked within her black hole, it was now the time of Oryx's downfall at the hands of the Guardians of the Light. And with it was now the rise of Savathun. The Taken War had now been and gone, and Oryx had been fully destroyed by the noble Guardians. But located within the Golden Age archaeologies of the moon of Titan, a new brood of Hive became noticeable for humanity. Whilst venturing the site, the Guardians' scans would find that the brood was linked to Savathun. Somehow this brood had been taking Guardians and converting them into void crystals to feed some sort of summoning ritual to her, with the centerpiece of it being the large shrieker titled Savathun's Song. The Guardians, however, had been successful in shutting down the summoning. However, these were the first signs of a new threat from the Hive. On top of this, evidence was now appearing all over the solar system that indicated that Savathun had now taken control of the Taken through the help of Coria and its processing of how one can take individuals, as it had perfected simulations of Oryx. These Taken were seen to have invaded the moon of Io, as well as take the Red Legion commander of Grask in their process. Over on Mars, the Guardians' first encounter with the Worm God took place as the Guardians encountered Zol, who had been sending messages to Savathun, pleading with her to arise from the deep and claim their power. Whilst no contact was made back from Savathun to Zol, ascendant portals were seen within Hela's basin, with some of Savathun's envoys within. But it wasn't until the Guardians made it to the Tangled Shore where Savathun's true presence was first felt. By this point in the timeline, Savathun had gained control of all of the Taken within the reef and sided with a very powerful ally. That ally being the last remaining Ahamkara in the solar system, known as Riven. Originally taken by Oryx, but with his passing during the Taken War, Riven now remained within the Dreaming City, retaining her sense of self and free will. Now serving Savathun, Riven would launch an attack on the reef, using her Taken to corrupt all of the Awoken in the process, and using proxies like Aldrin Sov and his fallen Scorn. Whilst this was successful in opening the gateway to the city, it left her open to the Guardians, who were sent to kill her. Whilst the Guardians were able to kill Riven, its death granted them one last wish. With it, Riven cursed the Dreaming City with Taken energies and altered its rules of ascendancy. At some point during this, Savathun realigned with her sister Xivu Arath and aimed at taking over their brother's army. The Guardians tried so hard to fight back against the corruption, fooling their plans at stealing Awoken relics of dangerous knowledge. Savathun also entrusted her daughter Dul Inkaru, the Eternal Return, to command the Taken curse within the Dreaming City, as well as finding a way to invade the Awoken home planet to help them find new bonds of godly strength. Mara Sov, the Queen of the Awoken, put a stop to this, however, with the help of the Guardians, and fought back against the corruption again, fighting through the former corrupted throne world of the Awoken Queen, and killed the daughter of the Witch Queen. Whilst this did look like a huge loss for Savathun and her Taken, this was actually part of her overall plan for the city. Killing Savathun's daughter triggered a time loop on the city, where it would be clear of the corruption. The corruption would take place again, Dul would return, and the Guardians would have to kill her once again. This was all thanks to the Taken Vexmind Coria once again, who created this time loop to help Savathun's long-term goal of amassing tribute for herself through her subordinates committing violence. This forced the Guardians into a dilemma. They could either continue to strike down Savathun's daughter over and over again, doing the same events each time, or they could allow her to complete her mission and take over the Awoken home planet. Around this same time, Savathun would continue to try and undermine the Guardians, but would be faced with a new threat, the former Cabal Emperor Callus. Savathun tried to lay a trap out for the Guardians, leading them to find the Crown of Sorrow, an ancient Ascendant Hive relic which supposedly imitated Oryx's power to compel wills. However, Savathun had a different plan with it, and that was to spy on Callus from the Ascendant realm, hoping that one day he would put it on and she would then control him. Callus, however, was skeptical of this, believing it had been cursed or contained some powerful magic, and after studying it with his scions, got Galran, the Sorrow Bearer, to wear the crown to try and make him control the Hive. However, Savathun's enchantments drove him insane and released the Hive within the Leviathan's menagerie. Galran was, however, sentenced to death by the Guardians as they raided the Leviathan and put him down with the aid of Savathun's magic. The crown was then retrieved and cleansed of all her enchantments, but Savathun wasn't done and went on to torment Callus by invading the minds of his loyalists through the use of her viral language, also leaving messages within the a chronicon, which was Callus's document that recorded his and his loyalists' past and future deeds. Savathun continued to meddle with affairs all across the galaxy, with her being found responsible for Crota's betrayal as 3 sibling Hive heretics of the spawn of Crota took over the leadership of Crota's army of the Hidden Swarm located on the moon. After spending time with these 3 siblings, empowering them with new titles, the new siblings of Azavath would become Ir-Iram, Deathsinger, and kill their sibling Agrazul, as well as the Swarm's champion Zulmak in the process. With this Malkanath, the other sibling was also killed in the process, leaving just one of the siblings left. Now with her new Deathsinger, the Witch Queen made contact with the daughters of the fallen Crota, and made a deal with them, helping them to reform the Choir, a legendary group of Death Singers that were to be led by Ir-Iram. With this deal, the daughters would go on to invest in setting up the Scarlet Keep on the moon, to lure the Guardians there and set up the events that were to come about. But Savathun once again had deceived the daughters. She knew that despite setting up their grand army within the keep, the Guardians would still obliterate their forces. Savathun's ultimate plan here was to completely wipe out Oryx's bloodline, and with the setup of the Scarlet Keep luring the Guardians there, this was indeed possible, as the Guardians invaded them in full force. By this point, Savathun's power was growing, and she was becoming noticeable for a lot of the Guardians. However, in the next coming months and years, she would finally reveal herself in person to the Guardians, and set up the next series of events as part of her ultimate plan. After the Battle of Luna and her bickering with Callus, Savathun found a new way to extend her plans. Here she found a huge computational array on Io that was owned by the Vex. With this array, Savathun would be able to gain more knowledge to further her plans and inform her pawns to do what she wanted them to do. With this, Savathun sent a Taken Blight into the array to corrupt it and bring it under her full control. But the Vex did not take lightly to this and took to immediately hitting back against the Taken forces. With this, a war broke out between both forces. The Guardians took notice of this as a strange surge of power started forming beneath the Pyramidion, where the array was located. A strike team was sent down to investigate it, finding both the Vex and Taken fighting amongst themselves, with the Taken being led by Barisk, envoy of Savathun. The Guardians immediately saw that the Taken Blight was of similar shape to that of the ones taking over the Dreaming City, and immediately knew this was Savathun's doing. But Eris Morn warned Zavala that the Witch Queen was not foolhardy as her brother Oryx, and would not meet with them for face-to-face confrontation, but the Dreaming City must be ready for when Savathun was to take action. As time passed and the pyramids started arriving within the Sol system, Savathun tried desperately to stop the Guardians from communicating with them, getting her nephew Nokris involved to try and defy the pyramids, as he had incredible necromantic powers. As the pyramids first made contact with the Guardians on the moon, a vessel placed itself above the cradle, and a tree of silver wings helped guide the Guardians to it and what it had on offer. But immediately Savathun sent her Taken forces to stop the Guardians from starting a communication. As more of the pyramids started appearing all over the Sol system in Mercury, Titan and Mars, multiple eyes of Savathun appeared in the same locations, looking as if she was spying on all that was going on. However, thanks to the tree's branches and the darkness, the Guardians were able to hit back at Savathun, kill Nokris and end her overall involvement, allowing them to finally communicate with the darkness. Now as Savathun tried to stop the pyramids, the Hive broods that once looked to Savathun now branded her as a heretic for going against the darkness and siding with the exiled Nokris. This led Savathun to flee, with even her own court not knowing her own whereabouts. This allowed her sister Shivu Arath to step in and use her powers to reignite the Hive within the system. Here she created the Wrathborn corruption and sent her champion, the High Celebrant, to hunt down Savathun and gain control of the Hidden Swarm once again. However, Savathun's Taken was still operational as they flocked to the EDZ to find a new piece of the Traveller that was calling out to the Guardians and the Crow in the form of a paracausal hawk. Once again, Savathun interfered with this whole affair like she had done with the Tree of Silver Wings before. Watching the Guardian and Crow's victory, however, made her feel the warmth of nostalgia as she remembered her father, sisters, and their past on Fundament. Savathun continued to meddle with all the affairs of the Guardians at this point, as well as other species such as the Cabal. After Ghaul's defeat, Savathun messed with the Evercat general Arath and made her obsessed with the Hive. Here she started worshipping the Hive gods, as well as their battle techniques, which she adapted to the Cabal, seeing it as their only way they could really survive going forward. With Savathun really in control, she started to conduct a ritual in the central square of Torobattle's weaponsmith district. But as she did, Keitel, Callus's daughter, approached her to make a stand against the general. Arath tried to get Keitel to kneel before the god of war, but she refused and slew the general in the process. But this made Savathun desperate to continue her plan, which was to summon Arath into the district and to wage war upon it. In her summoning, she said, Arath, hear me, you are war, and I conjure you with war and blood, a gift for you, my favourite sister. After the Guardians dealt with Keitel and her Cabal, the city was plunged into a never-ending night caused by the Vex who had put them in a simulation. As they tried desperately to work out what Vex's mind was behind it, the simulation grew each week. But as they continued to work out what was going on with the help of Mithrax, it became clear that it wasn't the Vex who were ultimately behind it. In fact, it was Savathun the whole time, which was told to everyone by Lakshmi too, as she rebelled against the Guardians and the Vanguard. The only way to shut down the Eternal Night was to enter the Vex network and destroy Korea, but this became difficult as when they entered the network, both Vex and Taken were within it, and their HUD was filled with mysterious messages. Savathun watched over everything they were doing during this time and fed on their ignorance and naivety, but her worm's thirst for hunger was getting worse, and it became clear to her that the Traveler was within her grasp. This would direct her eyesight towards it for her next step in her plan. Eventually the Guardians were able to destroy Korea, and with it the Endless Night was lifted for the city. Savathun surprisingly did not expect this to happen, and because of it she lost a bit of control over the Taken. After this event, however, Lakshmi too could not stand that the last city had the Elixni within it, still seeing them as humanity's enemy. Trying desperately to convince the Guardians of her stance on the matter, the last city was suddenly under attack by the Vex, who had invaded the Elixni area of the city, which was supposedly assisted by the legendary warlock Osiris, as Lakshmi lost control of the Vex portal. Lakshmi died in the process of this attack, and luckily the Guardians were able to close the portal and save the Elixni community, destroying the Vex in the process. But during the fight, Osiris disappeared, which instantly made the tower suspicious of his behaviour, thinking that he was most likely behind this. As they tracked the supposed traitor across the system, Saint 14, the Guardians, and Crow found Osiris within the reef, entering the Dreaming City and speaking with Mara Sov. As they cornered him, it was revealed that Osiris was not himself. Instead, it was Savathun who had taken his identity, as she was hiding from her sister, Arath, who was now supposedly hunting her on someone else's behalf. For her survival, Savathun bargained with Mara Sov, saying that she would release Osiris as long as they could help her feed her worm's hunger. Despite so many worries about Savathun and the lies she was known for, the party agreed to help her as they were desperate to save their friend, as well as Mara Sov's people, who were lost within the Ascendant Plane. With Mara Sov's Techian Coven, they would be able to exorcise Savathun's worm and stop Arath from fully corrupting reality through the dimensional ley lines. As the Guardians helped out Mara Sov to save her Techians, they would for the first time encounter the Witch Queen herself, as she stated she regrets how long it took to actually meet them face to face. With this, she also stated that she was the one who throughout had been protecting them from the dangers they faced, all before she took the form of Osiris. Like when they encountered the Black Fleet, or when Zavala and Empress Keitel almost went to war against one another, as well as many other events. She also went on to say that she is no villain. People just may not agree with her methods. However, also said that the Guardians are no heroes either, and that both of them were paracausal. This threw the Guardians. However, they continued to help Mara Sov try and remove the worm for Savathun, believing that once they did, she would not be able to hide any more lies from them and would be vulnerable, as she would not be able to access her throne world when she needs to retreat, giving Mara Sov enough time to strike her down. But despite this plan, everyone was still suspicious, as Crow went on to say that during her time as Osiris, she had him gather dead ghosts from the Spider's collection, with no real idea as to what she would need with them. Savathun was planning something. But what? Eventually she would meet with the Guardians once again and explain that they could not stop the inevitable, and that she needed to talk to Crow to explain what she had done, as he remains vulnerable to false promises from supposed benefactors. But with all of this, both Ikora and Mara Sov refused to allow Crow to meet with Savathun, knowing full well that she would lie and trick him with her words and force him to make critical mistakes. This made Crow extremely angry, but it was all to save him from what could be dangerous lies and manipulation. As the worm's exorcism came to its conclusion, as Mara Sov's coven got ready, Xivu Arath arrived, throwing everything at the spire to try and finally capture her sister, with the worm gods surrounding the tip of the spire. The Guardians were sent in their masses as Xivu Arath's forces threw themselves at the place, trying to overthrow the people of the reef. But the Guardians held strong and cut through all of Xivu Arath's finest champions. As the exorcism went ahead, Saint 14 along with the Guardians defended the Techians as they conducted their exorcism, as once again the Hive came in their full force, with Xivu Arath's newest champion being sent as a last resort. But it would not work, as the Guardians were too strong yet again, and the exorcism went fully ahead. However, as it progressed, the crystal shattered, and within it was not the Witch Queen, only the body of their friend who had been taken, Osiris, with Savathun calling out, "Thank you." But where did Savathun go? What was the point of this exorcism in her eyes? And what is her plan now that Mara Sov has fought off and summoned Xivu Arath? The truth of that is right around the corner. But for now, Savathun's plan has worked, as she has fooled everyone. And the Vanguard, along with Mara Sov, who has now acquired Savathun's worm in the process, will be finding out how they play their part in the next chapter of the Witch Queen's story. And that is the tale of Savathun the Witch Queen, the Hive God of Lies. Or is it? It may seem extremely complex, the story of Savathun, but that is because she has constructed a web of lies over the years, and to this date it is still unknown what she truly wants. However, her past says a lot about who she is and what she ultimately wants, and maybe going into the Witch Queen we will finally be able to see what she truly wanted all along, and how we've played a part in it from the start. But I hope you enjoyed this video and it wasn't too complicated. Not gonna lie, some bits confused me, but I tried to make it as coherent as possible. If you did like this video, do give it a like, leave a nice comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out my other lore videos in the description below, and if you really like this video, then why not become a Patreon or a YouTube channel member for early access to these videos, as well as them being completely ad-free. And like always, I'd like to thank my supporters real quick. Big thanks to our small fish guys, our big fishes Sacrum, Rhinohead, Eddie, Christopher, Andrew, Last Persona user and Artocrem, our sharks Whale Such Gaming and Connor, and our huge megalodons Sinus, Jacob Garcia, Chernobyl Stalker, Shadow SGT and Ryan Everett. Also big shout out to our YouTube channel members, our wise ones Jambu and Fiery Italian, as well as all my amazing subscribers over on Twitch, which I will return to, I do promise. Please stay with me. But yeah, as always, your support means the world to me and means I can make these videos for you, so thank you all so very much. But that is all for now. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the Witch Queen's release if you are getting it, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.